Hey guys, Lucas Carroll here from the Business of Senior Care, coming to you today in part 6 of the video series about home care survey and plan a correction timeline. And part 6 is all about writing that plan of correction. So probably the most important component of the overall survey and plan of correction process is actually taking that time to write that plan of survey and get it into the health department. And in doing this, for myself and working with numerous home care agencies, I've come across a couple of things that I think are critical to helping during this process. One of the important keys to success in the plan of correction is one, following that 5 required elements for the plan of correction. Just laying out a plan of correction that's simple, straightforward, but follows all of the 5 required elements, which we'll go through. And 2, for the plan of correction process is to not commit yourself to extra work that you don't need to do. So don't overcommit yourself in the obligations that you put in the plan of correction. And what I mean by that is if it only really requires for you to audit 3 client files to get that plan of correction accepted, then don't put down that you're going to audit all client files. And the same goes for providing education. If you only really need to provide education to one person, don't commit yourself to providing education to every staff member in your agency. And we'll talk more about that as we go through the process. And so next we're going to take a look at a plan of correction template, which is a tool that I developed that I can provide to you to utilize, and it just identifies the 5 required elements and just makes the process for writing that plan of correction just as easy as possible. So let's take a look at the template.
All right, here we can see our plan of correction template. This plan of correction template is a helpful tool in which to organize your survey and deficiencies that you were cited, and then the different plan of corrections that you're putting together for each deficiency. So we'll walk through this example, and then we'll scroll down and look at an actual example of a deficiency and then how the plan of correction was written. So on this template, starting at the top, you would enter the survey exit date. That would be the date, of course, that the surveyor leaves your facility and has exited with you. Then you count your 10 business days in which that you are going to receive your statement of deficiencies, that 10 business days or before. And then you would put the date on here for the 10 calendar days in which do you have to respond and submit your plan of correction. And then identify your compliance date, which comes out of that health department letter. And that compliance date is the date in which that you are promising to complete your plan of correction. The next section on here is which deficiency, the number that you were cited, and that will come across in your statement of deficiencies. Next is what sort of topic. Is it about personal care training? Is it about client documentation? Is it about the admission process? So what is the topic, which that will also be listed in the statement of deficiencies. And then next is what does the regulation text say? So what's the regulation state that you need to be doing? And then the last item on there is the survey findings. So that in there is where the surveyor identifies what you as the agency needed to do. So based on what they found, whether it was a record review, client file, caregiver file, observation, interview, so whatever process that they used, what they found, what was the deficient practice that they found based on the regulation and the text of the regulation. So in that survey findings is where the meat of how you're going to start to conduct your plan of correction. As we scroll down a little bit, you can see on this sheet of paper there are the 5 required elements for conducting a plan of correction. And number 1 is in the plan of correction is where you start. So what they want you to indicate here in number 1, it says the plan for correcting the specific deficiency. The plan should address the internal processes that led to the deficient practice cited. So what I always say in number 1, it's to fix what's broken. So whatever was specifically identified by the surveyor, whether it was a staff member, a document, or a policy, they want you to fix it. And it really only boils down to Either you didn't follow a policy or process, or the policy or process is broken. So really think about, it's one of the two things. Do I need to educate one staff member or multiple staff members because they didn't follow the policy? That was the policy was accurate, but we didn't follow it. Or alternatively, is your policy not correct, or the process that your agency uses not correct? So if your policy was written but it doesn't follow how the regulation is written, then you would need to look at changing your policy. So here, that's where number one, you would say that you provided education to the specific persons or people because they didn't follow your policy, or the actual policy or the process was not correct and you fixed your policy or process. So that's typically number one. Number two is, what procedure did you use for implementing the plan of correction for the specific deficiencies identified or cited? So in the number two, for those that are coming from the medical world and for CMS, when they put together a 2567 is what they call it, or statement of deficiencies, the number two here is identification of others. And that's really what they're wanting you to address here. So while they specifically told you about client number one or caregiver number three in the survey findings, here they want you to identify if this issue is broken or needs to be fixed in other areas. So if they found one client, they may want you here to look for a process or procedure for identifying other clients. Or if there is one caregiver who needs education, do you need to provide education to other caregivers? This in number two is where I identify any other either systems, policies, or staff members that need education. So that's where in number two you look at identification of other related issues related to this regulation that need to be fixed. Number three is typically called ongoing monitoring, or the monitoring procedure to ensure the plan of correction is effective and the specific deficiency cited remains corrected and or in compliance with the regulatory requirements. So here they want you to create an ongoing monitoring program. So this is where you do your auditing. So if one client file was missing the written notice of or disclosure statements or written notice of consumer rights or something like that, they want you to monitor ongoing. It's where you're checking other client files in the future to make sure that it has that document. So you're putting together a plan on how you're going to monitor different policies, different client files, different staff members so that they do the right thing in the future. And this is where you make a promise on what you're going to do in number three. Number four is the title of the person for implementing the POC. Pretty straightforward, where you identify a specific title. So that typically is the agency manager, executive director. My hint here or suggestion here is to put agency manager or designee. So if your agency yourself or your agency manager take a Hawaiian vacation or just fall off the face of the earth, you can really indicate on here that a designee or somebody else will take care of it and get it done. And then last is the completion date. And the completion date I typically equate with the compliance date, which is put in the letter that the health department sends you when you receive your statement of deficiencies. There's typically also a letter that comes along with it that just indicates your agency, you had survey, and the deficiencies were cited. And in there, they'll say the agency needs to be in compliance by date XYZ. So that's the date that they want you to have done the items in your plan of correction, fixed them, and gotten back on the path to correct it, and that you're doing the right things moving forward. And so you just would enter a date here. Next, we'll scroll down and look at an actual example and what items we put in the 5 different areas. So in this example, the survey exited on December the 2nd. That would mean in 10 business days from them, which would be the 16th, you would expect to receive your statement of deficiencies on or before that date. Then by December 26th, which is 10 calendar days, you as the agency need to submit that plan of correction That's the last day to do that. And then in the letter that they supply is a compliance date. In this particular example, the compliance date is December 31st. So that's the date in which that you are promising that you'll have all your components of your plan of correction done. The specific deficiency. So in this example, it was for a Class B non-medical agency. The tag number was 415. The topic was personal care worker documentation. And the specific regulation stated, the documentation shall contain services provided, date and time in and out, and a confirmation that care was provided. Such confirmation shall be according to agency policy. So that's the general regulation text that was found to be have a deficiency or deficient practice. And then next, specifically what the surveyor said is that based on the record review and an interview, the agency failed to ensure written service notes documenting the services provided by the staff, specifically personal care worker number 2, at each visit were maintained and available for review for one of 3 records review, specifically consumer number 1. So this personal care worker number 2 did not write service notes related to a specific visit that took place for consumer number 1. So now you can identify how you're going to fix it. In number 1, we're going to fix what's broken. So here we say the personal care worker number 2 was provided education on the agency policy to record written service notes documenting the services provided by staff at each visit, and it was done at the time of survey on December 2nd of 2021. So immediately it was identified during the survey that it was an issue. The agency manager proactively provided education to the caregiver to say that you got to be sure to enter in notes for every shift, documenting what you're doing, and that was completed and documented and done at the time of survey. So you fixed the problem. There was only one caregiver identified by the surveyor and only one client that was a part of the issue, and so you fixed it immediately prior to the exit of the survey. Number 2, the implementing the acceptable plan of correction. The agency reviewed consumer number 1, the care plan, and the service notes to ensure caregivers are recording written service notes documenting the services provided at each visit, and you did so no later than December 26th, which was the date that you had to submit your plan of correction. So here, there was only one client that was identified. So what you did in order to identify others, other caregivers in this instance, you just looked at all the caregivers that were currently working with client number 1, and you made sure that all of the service notes were entered for each visit for all caregivers. That was your attempt to identify to make sure there was no further deficient practice for that particular client. Moving down to number 3, your ongoing monitoring on what you're going to do. Here you state the agency will use an audit tool starting on December 27th to review 2 clients per week for 3 months to ensure caregivers are recording written service notes documenting the services provided at each visit. All monitoring quarterly will be reported to the quality management program for reviews and conclusions. So basically here you're saying that after you reviewed the consumer file number 1 by December 26th, then the very next day on the 27th, you're going to start your audits. And what you're going to do is you're going to audit 2 clients per week for the next 3 months to make sure that your caregivers are getting in those documented service notes after each visit. So that's what you're promising to do to maintain compliance and making sure that this is not an issue that happens again. Number 4, you have identified the agency manager or designee are going to be the responsible parties, and you're promising, number 5, that you're going to get it all done by December 31st. So that completion date or compliance date, what you're promising is numbers 1 and 2 on here. So you're promising that you'll do the education in number 1, that you'll also do review consumer number 1's care plan and service notes, And also additionally for number 3, you're not going to be fully done, but that you'll have started the auditing process on the 27th. But of course you won't be done with the auditing because you're going to do it for the next 3 months. So by that 31st date, which again is the compliance date that was identified in the health department's letter, you'll have done number 1 and 2 for sure, and you'll have started number 3, and you can send, if they request it, you can send what you have done for number 3 so far during the auditing process. So that's a quick look on completing the POC template. It's helpful to identify the different elements. Also up top here, it's also helpful to identify exactly what the tag is, what the regulation states, and then what the surveyor found, so that it'll help you to fix whatever problems are going on and identify those issues to help to correct them moving forward. And that's it. That's everything regarding the POC and writing just an awesome POC that'll be accepted that first time.